Good afternoon, church family. So, what day is it? Does anybody know? I could use some help. I'm having a little trouble keeping my day straight. I use routine like a lot of people to sort of keep things in order in my life, and as with all of us, routines have changed, and so if you're still working, praise God for that. But you're probably doing it from home now. For most of you, that's a change in routine. It's not for me, although there are other aspects of it that are different. But it's a big adjustment for a lot of us, and certainly having your kids home all the time is a big adjustment. And some of us are not working at all, and so what an incredible adjustment that is. Whether you're working or not, you've probably got some extra time to account for, especially the time at home after hours. And so that's time that we used to fill with other things, right? So, the after work hours were the times when we were running kids around or going to games or concerts or practices. They were the times when we were doing church stuff, when we were making our Costco runs. All these things took up time, and now those things are not so much. And, we used to do things like watch live sports on television. We even sort of centered our calendars around some things like that. That's all gone. We can't even talk to our neighbors from less than 6 feet away. These routines are just different. I've been trying to stick to my pre-pandemic routine as much as possible. For the most part, I've done that within certain restrictions. It does help that I'm used to working at home. But there are certain things that I use to mark the days that are not an option right now, and I'm wrestling with that a little bit. So, I typically would have breakfast every Tuesday with Danny, and obviously that's out the window. Wednesday night Bible studies are gone, things like that. Honestly, the last 2 Saturdays, I've woken up very early in sort of a semi-state of panic because I suddenly realized or thought, oh no, this is Sunday, and I'm not ready to preach. And so thankfully, it wasn't Sunday, but that was just that routine that I'm setting to the routine. And so having work to do definitely helps. I still have deadlines. A lot of you still do, and that's good. Our D groups are still meeting, and our small groups are still meeting, and there's still a lot of meetings. And, those things are still taking place, even if they're taking place electronically. But it does help with routine to have stuff on the calendar. So I'm just kind of wondering, what's your new routine? I'm going to share you. I put a little video together, a short video with some of the things that I've been doing both during and after work hours. I thought I would share that with you, and I'll get back to you in a minute. H3. It's J10. Miss. H4. So there you go. That's kind of what I've been up to. Life has been very exciting here in the Werkheiser household for the last couple of weeks. I'd love to see what you've been doing with this change of routine. Did you find some interesting things to do, some clever ideas to occupy your time, some crazy inventions, whatever. I'd love to see them. So shoot me a video clip of some of the things you've been up to. It doesn't have to be very long. If I get enough of these, I'll maybe put together a longer version and share them with everybody. So only send me stuff that you wouldn't mind sharing with other people. And please don't text them to me. Send them to me by email. And if you have any questions about how to do that, give me a text or email or phone call and I can walk you through. But again, I'd love to see what you've been doing with your routine over the last couple of weeks. So as we think about routine, I'm back with the Israelites again. They've been on my mind quite a bit. So we talked about some events in the history of Israel last time. Sometime after that, they're about to enter the Promised Land. It's an important phase in their history. But, they get right up to the edge. They send some spies in. They come back and reports. It freaks them out a little bit, the sight of these people that they're being asked to conquer. And their faith wavers. And they complain again. Oh, if only we could be back in Egypt again where everything was just wonderful. Oh, if we could only be slaves again. And so God, understandably, is frustrated with this. And in Numbers chapter 14, he pronounces judgment against them. And the judgment is harsh. It's serious. He says to the nation of Israel, he says, for 40 years, you are going to wander in the wilderness. You're not going to have a homeland. And we're going to wait because it's going to take 40 years for this faithless generation to die off. And so we're going to wait till they're all dead. And only then will I allow you into the Promised Land. And so that's a very monumental period of time in the history of God's people, the history of the Israelites. There's a lot we could talk about there. At the moment, I'm trying to imagine how the Israelites spend 40 years in the desert with what would have had to have been, on some level, pretty much the same routine. Did you ever really think about that? I mean, you get up every day and you go out and you gather manna because that's part of your daily thing. And you got to get just the right amount, not too much, but enough to feed everyone. And then you're going to take it back. You're going to make it into food. I'm sure things to tend to around the camp and responsibilities. We just don't know a lot about what they had to do. Every so often, the leaders would say, okay, it's time to get up and pack up and move. And so they'd pack all their stuff up and they'd move to another location. But that's it. Wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And sure, they had a few religious festivals that would break up the monotony. I'm sure those were really looked forward to. But really their big excitement was the Sabbath. And I think you have to believe that was probably the only way they could really tell what day of the week it was. But the Sabbath was much more than something for them to build their calendar around. In fact, the two different accounts of the giving of the law in the Old Testament, in the Torah, the first 5 books, they point to two different purposes, and it's interesting to read the different accounts. And so if you go read the one we usually read, which is in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, it talks about the Sabbath, and it emphasizes the connection of the Sabbath to God's taking a day of rest, a day off after his 6 days of creation. And so really it celebrates God's creative powers. But then in Deuteronomy, second law, the restating of the law in chapter 5, verse 15, it ties the Sabbath back to the Exodus. And really it focuses there on Israel's national identity as God's chosen people and how God is powerful not just in a creative sense, but he's powerful in the way that he exercises his power for the benefit of his people. And so those are really two compelling reminders, I think, for God's people at any time, of the nature of God and how much we're loved and taken care of. And I think especially in a time of trial like now, we need to remember those things. And there are probably some other things that we need to be reminded of as well, as maybe as time goes on, as we're quarantined or sequestered, sheltering in place for longer and longer, we start to feel sorry for ourselves, don't we? I know I've had some moments of that in the last couple of weeks. And so I'm thinking about some of those blessings that we're reminded of. I'm thinking about the Israelites and how they were wanderers without a home. And what a blessing it is that most of us, almost all of us, I think in our congregation, all of us have a home that we can go to. And there's different levels of different sizes, different neighborhoods, but we all have a place with a roof over our heads where we can go shelter in place. What a blessing that is. And how blessed we are largely to be in good health. And to have so far as a congregation to have escaped this pandemic. What a blessing that is. How blessed we are, many of us, to still have a job, to still be working. How blessed we are to still be a part of this church community. And you know, for some of us, this time that we're having with family may be sort of a once in a lifetime blessing. I don't know if you've really thought about that. The writer Jonah Goldberg once described fatherhood as a time of, he said, long days and short years. And you know, my kids live far away, and I can hardly read that quote without getting choked up. Long days and short years. That's so true. Time goes fast when you're a parent. And so are we appreciating the opportunities that some of us are having right now to have so much time with our families, maybe more time than we've ever had with our families. Normally we sort of complain about how busy we are and how hard it is to get everybody together in the same place at the same time. And now here it is. We're all together in the same place at the same time. Many of us are. What a blessing that is. One more thing about this story. When God condemns them to wander because of their lack of faith, he gives them a hard deadline. He says, you know, you're going to do this for 40 years. And after 40 years, then the punishment will be over, and I'm going to take you into the promised land. And I imagine when he first said, okay, from this day on, count off, it's going to be 40 years. I imagine that sounded, you know, impossibly far off, especially there at the beginning. And I can only imagine, you know, the building of anticipation as it got closer and closer and closer. COVID-19 is hard on us for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is because we don't have an end date. On the other hand, you know, every worst case scenario I've seen, nothing has come close to anything like 40 years. And so in the near future, we're going to be able to anticipate a return to some sense of normalcy. And what a day that's going to be. I can't wait to celebrate it with all of you. And so in the meantime, stay home, stay safe, keep praying. I love you.